burger, but I don't particularly make a habit of it. I am
it just
the
seems
person
like a
that
weird thing to me.
And many vegans would agree with you. And the fact is those foods aren't really there for vegans. They're actually there for the flexitarians, for the people that want to reduce their animal intake, not quite sure how to do it. Oh, I don't know how to cook vegan. Oh, look, there's a vegan sausage. I know how to cook a sausage. I'll have that. And that's what they do, and that's what people do. It's all about habit. And so we're just saying, hey, how about change those habits? And that's what those meat alternatives are about. It's about making a very simple choice. Instead of buying your meat burger, you can buy your plant-based burger. Instead of buying your dairy milk, you can buy your plant-based milk.
Don't make it almond milk, because...
That's right, yeah.
That's a problem.
I mean, I think the fundamental challenge for the veganism movement is a taste-driven one as well.
People are always surprised by how tasty vegan food is when they actually try it. I mean, the number of omnis that I have cooked for, and they've gone, oh, wow, that's really tasty, as if they're shocked, as if they think that I want to eat something that tastes like cardboard. I mean, I genuinely don't. I like to eat tasty things, and so I like to cook for people and be able to show them that actually you're not missing out on anything. By going vegan, you're not missing out on anything at all.
All right,
loads of taste.
Claire, we've had a huge response to this, so I really appreciate I really appreciate you coming onto the panel and discussing with us, and hope we can get you back on again. That is Claire Inslee, spokesperson for the Vegan Society Aotearoa. Claire, thank you for that. Equal response either side, actually. Matthew says, I killed a beast today in a paddock surrounded by trees. Meat for a year for a family. Now I'm chopping firewood from one of those trees.
Back to nature.
But to me, though, I think that is actually the bigger trend. I think increasingly people want to eat local, they want to eat natural, and they want to eat in a sustainable way. And I just have a sense that in 20 or 30 years' time, things like this Impossible Burger and lab-produced meat, people that should be disgusted by it. You think about 40 years ago when margarine came out, we've got this artificial product which will replace butter. Now, actually, we go, well, we want to eat less butter, but we still actually want it because it's a natural, organic product.
And there are places, less so in New Zealand, but, like eating kangaroo in Australia is a very good thing for the environment.
Right.
There are too many kangaroos. It is destroying the land.
But you see, I'm going to say I'm a meat eater as well, and I do enjoy, like you, very rare. But I also do actually quite like the taste of these plant-based burgers. I had one last night. Had a little bit of kimchi. You've got the plant-based burger. You've got the buns. You've got the salad. You've got the hummus. Tell you what, Thomas. It was a good meal.
It's a good meal, but not as good as the real thing.
Okay. Well, that's what.
So you can't
it was.
deny it. I mean, everybody says, and that's why I get your point. I do find the meat substitute really weird because, let's be honest, vegan bacon doesn't taste as good as real bacon.
Why
So don't
would
even
you
try and
bother?
compete. Yeah. It's a very strange.
I find it hard enough when I'm in countries where I have to have beef bacon or turkey bacon.
Turkey bacon. Yeah, that's right.
Don't do it.
You don't like it?
No.
I quite like the taste, but it's different.
I'm going to have a pig if I want bacon.
But to
and
that,
I really don't feel guilty about it, I have to say.
Well, a lot of we'll try and get some of your response in the Friday mailbag. But in a final note, would you ever try an Impossible Burger, Caroline?
Oh, sure. I eat a lot of very odd things all around the world in my job. Bring it on.
Thomas?
Oh, absolutely. But I think I'll stick with a nice bit of New Zealand organic beef burger.
Thomas Pryor and Caroline Daly, thank you very much for being on the panel. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow from 3:45. Until then, bye.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, the boss of RNZ concedes it's been a rocky ride for its planned revamp of Concert FM, but he reckons the outcome's positive. So what's the score? Was it a cunning plan all along? Let's ask CEO Paul Thompson. Well-dressed accountants and lawyers are propping up New Zealand's illegal drug trade, according to the Police Minister. Our reporter Logan Church gets an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at the fight against online child exploitation. And New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is distancing himself from the foundation at the centre of a serious fraud investigation. And a ceasefire is called as MPs of all stripes pay tribute to former Prime Minister Mike Moore.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The lead detective on a case where a 4-year-old Hawke's Bay boy was critically injured has described the injuries as horrific. The police say the child will be brain damaged and severely disabled if he survives. Detective Inspector Mike Foster says he was found critically injured at his home in Flaxmere on January the 29th.
This child has undergone a beating or a number of beatings by somebody. The injuries sustained to this poor child are horrific. Children should never, ever receive hidings like this or abuse like this. It's just disgraceful, really.
Detective Inspector Mike Foster says police are urging people to do the right thing and get in touch if they know anything, no matter how small. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is distancing himself from the foundation the Serious Fraud Office is making inquiries into. The Electoral Commission referred its investigation into the New Zealand First Foundation and its political donations to the police, which in turn directed them to the Serious Fraud Office yesterday. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she and Mr Peters, also the Deputy Prime Minister, enjoy a trusting working relationship and there's no reason to reconsider that at this time. Mr Peters says he's played no part in any wrongdoing.
I'm not subject to any investigation here, and nor in the sense is New Zealand First. So there's the end of it.
Winston Peters says he hopes any SFO investigation will be over quickly in a matter of weeks. The head of RNZ says the mix-up with the government over Concert FM was because of miscommunication. The Prime Minister has expressed her frustration that the state broadcaster announced proposed changes to the station, despite the government asking for more time to discuss alternatives. Last week, RNZ revealed plans to scrap Concert off FM in favour of a new music station targeted towards young people. The Chief Executive, Paul Thompson, says the confusion was unfortunate.
We did believe that we had carefully briefed everyone we needed to about our plans, but there was a miscommunication on one key point, and that key point on whether we would be talking publicly about the loss of Concert on FM. And I think that's where there was a miscommunication and that led to that gap. And look, it's unfortunate.
You can hear more from Paul Thompson in an interview on Checkpoint shortly. The police say they have prevented up to $5 million worth of drugs from hitting the streets after an international drug bust. 10 people have been arrested as part of the 8-month operation, including a New Zealand man who faces extradition to Italy. Detective Inspector Paul Newman says organised crime has become more sophisticated in recent years.
Our resourcing across all of government has been increased to focus on this threat to our communities.
Detective Inspector Paul Newman. It will be another week and a half before tourists can be brought into the Milford Sound by road. The only access to the area was cut off last week when wild weather caused slips and washouts. Road crews are working around the clock to reopen the road to essential traffic by the middle of next week. It's hoped tourists will get limited access, possibly in guided convoys, from the end of next week. Milford Sound Tourism owns and operates the visitors terminal and wharves in the Sound. It hopes temporary repairs underway on the terminal will get it back in action by the time most of the tourists return. The government is giving $80,000 to relieve drought conditions in Northland. The Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor says a dry spell since November is an adverse event for the primary sector, but is not yet declaring a drought. The money will include technical advice, social welfare and eased tax requirements. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. India have lost early wickets in the final cricket ODI at Mount Maunganui. The returning New Zealand captain Kane Williamson won the toss and sent India into bat. A short time ago, India were 123 for 3 off 24 overs. Changes driven by the players are creating an optimistic mood at the Warriors ahead of the new NRL Rugby League season. Teams have their first hit out of the year this weekend, with the annual Nines competition taking place in Perth. After a long-awaited return to the playoffs in 2018, the Warriors were again out of the mix last year, down in 13th. Following their disappointing 2019 campaign, the players took their thoughts to the coaching staff on what could change this year. Young forward Isaiah Papali says the squad certainly feels like their views have been valued.
Usually pre-Christmas we're kind of just hitting the road running, but we got a lot of skillful boys throughout the whole team, so being able to mix in that skill with the conditioning has probably been the most fun part, and something as a footy player, you always want to have a ball in hand.
All Whites and West Ham defender Winston Reid could still be on the move to the MLS football competition in the United States. Last week, Reid was reportedly headed to new expansion side Nashville, but that has stalled and he has remained in London. However, Reid could still head across the Atlantic, with West Ham manager David Moyes now saying another club appears interested. Reid hasn't played a competitive game for the Hammers in nearly 2 years after a succession of knee injuries. That's the news.
The race to take on Trump.
They're all fighting for survival right now because we're really down to only 5 or 6 candidates who could be the Democratic nominee.
Breaking through at the Oscars.
Hollywood has had to adapt. Their time is up and that Indigenous voices need to be heard.
Protecting teens from harm online.
You know, they may be sent it by their friends, but in a lot of cases they are going looking for content.
All the big stories. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For all of the North Island, fine weather apart from areas of cloud tomorrow morning. Fiordland, Southland and Otago, fine, but cloudy periods about the south coast. Becoming cloudy everywhere tomorrow evening. Rain developing at night in Fiordland with scattered falls for Southland and Clutha. For the remainder of the South Island, fine today. Cloudy areas developing in Canterbury and Marlborough this evening. Fine tomorrow, apart from areas of morning cloud. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Clearing tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine. RNZ National. It's 6.5 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Good evening and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. RNZ's CEO has admitted the public broadcaster didn't bother to ask for an additional frequency for its proposed youth channel before going public with plans to take Concert off FM in favour of the new station. Last week, RNZ revealed its plans to transform Concert into an automated non-stop music station which will stream online and play on AM radio. The Prime Minister yesterday expressed her frustration with RNZ, saying the broadcaster had been asked to put its plans on hold to give the government a chance to look at alternatives, but RNZ went public anyway, creating a backlash from Concert fans. Now the government's looking at freeing up the 102 frequency for the new youth channel, allowing Concert to stay on FM. I asked RNZ CEO Paul Thompson if this had been the strategy all along.
We're not smart enough to have conjured up a plan like that. It is a very positive outcome. How we got there was very bumpy and rocky, and I wouldn't advise it to anyone. But look, we do think that it's really affirming that the government has endorsed our strategy, which is that RNZ needs to become more relevant to younger people, and that a new music service is a great way of doing that, whilst at the same time reaffirming that RNZ Concert has got a very passionate set of listeners and supporters, and there's a future for that brand as well on FM.
I want to talk more about that brand, but did you actually bumble this strategy?
No, not at all. This was always going to be enormously difficult to explain as a strategy because originally as we conceived the strategy, it was about a trade-off of making a difficult decision of the FM network being prioritised for the younger audience brand, and that meant a big change for Concert. So however we went to explain that, however carefully we did it, whatever work we did with stakeholders, it was always going to be a tough sell. But it is a measure of the board and my commitment to the need for RNZ to become more relevant to younger people that we gritted our teeth and began this process last week. As it turns out, the feedback has been really intense. We expected it to be intense, and it was right at the upper end of what we expected. And is, as I've said, really positive, I think, that the government has provided us with an option to do both, and that was the key message, I think, from the Prime Minister yesterday.
Well, the Prime Minister suggests that there was a key message that they were willing to help you much earlier than yesterday, so let's explore that. She has stated clearly that Radio New Zealand was asked to hold fire and give the government time to consider a solution. Was that request made of Radio New Zealand? Who did it come from and when?
Look, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of what the Prime Minister
Well,
has said.
the ins and outs are really important here, very significant.
I will respond, but I do want to just make one thing clear. As Chief Executive, I'm not responsible for communication with our shareholders. But putting that aside, we did believe that we had carefully briefed everyone we needed to about our plans, but there was a miscommunication on one key point. And that key point on whether we would be talking publicly about the loss of concert on FM. And I think that's where there was a miscommunication, and that led to that gap. And look, it's unfortunate, and we had to take our medicine, if you like, but it did come down to a miscommunication on that point.
Okay, so whose miscommunication?
I think that we obviously didn't explain it clearly enough, and when we were talking about our plan, there was an assumption that it wouldn't be obvious initially that the FM transmission would be affected, and I think that was just a glitch in the communications.
Sorry, I'm to interrupt, Paul, but I just want to be clear about this. When you say there was a miscommunication, are you saying that it was not clear that you wished to move concert off FM?
I think what the miscommunication was, it was about whether in the initial discussions around the proposal, whether that would be part of the discussion. And I think that was just a miscommunication. And that's the only, it is, I think, easy to exaggerate the importance and the effects of that. It happened and it wasn't ideal, and we've had to deal with the consequences. But I think the bigger point really is that the government and RNZ are now on the same page, which is really good.
It's taken some time to get there, though, and it is important. Yep. The point made by the Prime Minister is significant. She says that Radio New Zealand was asked to give the government this window of opportunity. Was this message communicated to RNZ?
All I can say is that we believed that we'd done our briefing thoroughly, but there was that miscommunication. That's all I can say.
So have you apologised to the Broadcasting Minister, Chris Farfoy?
No, but I know that the Chairman of RNZ and the Minister have had lots of discussions on this, and you'd have to talk to them, but I don't think there is any lingering issue.
So did you not realise that you were being asked to take a breath here?
As I've said, it's a miscommunication.
All right, because it looks like you ignored a request from the Broadcasting Minister.
And look, we would not do that, but sometimes, particularly when you're dealing with complex issues, there will be a miscommunication.
The Prime Minister has also said that the changes that you are proposing were more than operational changes, that it's structural. So the suggestion is that perhaps you overstepped. Did you, in your plans?
I don't believe we did, but no one's ever tried to do something like this before, and it is a significant proposal. We certainly believe that we were acting within our responsibilities as a board and as a management team. And that would always be tested in future. Every year we have to prepare a statement of performance expectations which outlines the range of services. So there was going to always be opportunities to engage with the government, with our shareholder, on any service changes.
Because obviously some legal minds believe that the Radio Communications Act designates a particular channel for concert FM and that it would require some kind of legislation to change that. Did you take legal advice on that, and is that your belief?
Yes, we have taken legal advice on that. We are aware that we would have had to have that signed off as part of our annual statement of performance expectation negotiations with the government.
So
that was always going to be part of the plan.
So you were always needing the government rubber stamp to push forward?
Yes, we would have provided a proposal and there would have been feedback, and we would have, in the end, it has to be signed by the Minister.
Okay, so now that there is this suggestion that there is an additional FM frequency potentially available, are you still going to go ahead with the other changes on concert? Automation, shorter bulletins?
We're just thinking about things at the moment because these events have happened quite quickly in the last 24 hours, but we're going to take a few days to digest it, And we're obviously going to be working very carefully with staff on what this means.
So you're reversing your original proposal?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I'm going to take a couple of days and work with the team and have a think about it. But we do have a consultation underway with staff, and any communication and decisions around that need to be done with the staff, not on Checkpoint, I'm afraid. So you're going to have to give me a couple of days to work that through.
So why do you think the changes are necessary, the ones that you are considering, the automation, shortening of bulletins?
Well, the nub of the issue is that our charter requires us to be relevant to all New Zealanders, and at the moment RNZ does need to work very hard to connect with younger people. And that's one of the priorities that the government has set for us in the last few years, is to connect with more young people, more Māori and more Pacifica and regional audiences. So we can't stand still. But we only have a limited amount of resource to support all the things that we want to do. So the changes that we initially proposed for Concert were designed to free up resource so that we could staff our new service for young people.
So you openly acknowledge that one is at the expense of the other?
Everything we do as an organisation, there are always trade-offs. And we have always operating within a limited budget, and we need to do a lot of soul searching and take some hard decisions on the best use of that money, and it will always have an element, unless you're funded to do something that's new, fully funded to do something, you have to move your funding around. Otherwise, an organisation like RNZ will just get stuck for decades, and I don't think any media organisation these days can stand still.
So does that suggest that 18 to 35-year-olds have more value than the listeners of Concert, who are generally over the age of 65?
Absolutely not. And I think, the intense feedback we've had from our Concert listeners, and I would like to thank them for it, it's been very forthright, has underlined the importance of our service to them. But we know that RNZ looks after older audiences very well across all our platforms, including RNZ National Concert and our website. And we do need to broaden our footprint, if you like. We need to become relevant to young people, or in a few years' time we're going to be irrelevant to everyone. We just need to connect. So that's just a difficult trade-off. The really good thing about what's happened is we've been given an opportunity to do both, and I think that really is exciting. And look,
but even if you are given that opportunity, what you are suggesting is that the costs of having live announcers is prohibitive. So is it a funding issue? If the government gives you more money, can you maintain Concert as it is, exactly as it is? And would you?
I don't want to be drawn into this because I want to talk with the staff.
Why not? It's
Lisa.
the nub of the issue.
Because my priority at the moment is to talk with our staff who are affected. I think most of your listeners would understand that.
While you say you haven't made decisions, you're already advertising these jobs, so you're going down a path already, yet you're reluctant to discuss why. Just make sure, clarify that. We have advertised for one role in the new brand. That's all we're doing. It's one position. In terms of what RNZ Concert will be in future, we're taking our time to think about all the feedback. I think I really need to be thoughtful around all the feedback we've had, the changes in terms of what the government's announced, and working with my team to get the best possible result. I will say that RNZ will continue to have a really strong classical music service, and the events of the last 24 hours have helped us do that. Can you describe the flavour of the new brand, as you put it?
I'm not the right person to do that, and when we get to the point of staffing it and recruiting it, it will be staffed. But as
CEO, you must be able to describe this band that you're placing a lot of value on.
No, I think I'm the wrong person to do it. I mean, seriously, we know where the audience opportunity is. It's for 18 to 34-year-olds. We know it's going to play a lot of New Zealand music. It will play more New Zealand music than anything else in the market. It will play more live performance of New Zealand artists than anything in the market. But it has to be staffed and run by people who are of the audience we're trying to reach. Those people are not in the organisation as yet in large numbers. We're going to have to recruit them.
Right, so you're going to need money for this, aren't you? So how much?
Yes,
put a number on it.
Look, that's I actually don't have the figure at my fingertips, and it's not something I'd share here anyway, but we do
Give us
see
a
a pathway. No, I'm not going to do it, Lisa. It's not something I'm going to do on air. What I can say is that we're confident.
It's public money though, so why can't you be upfront about it?
Because we're still working through elements of the proposal with the government and with staff, so I just don't think it's fair. And in the end, we think we can do a great job and create, I don't know whether any listeners are familiar with Triple J in Australia, but broadly speaking, we'd like to do something which has some of those qualities. It's public radio, it's commercial free, it's charter driven, it plays a lot of New Zealand music, and it's staffed, it looks and sounds like young New Zealand.
So what specific research have you done about this group, the 18 to 35, the so-called, well, you call them social connectors, don't you? So what research have you done about exactly what they want from this, and what are they telling you?
Look, there's a range of information that we rely upon, but our segmentation work, which you've just mentioned,
but specifically
is
your
pivotal.
research?
Yes, that is our research. We did it with Colmar Brunton last year. It's a significant segmentation of the New Zealand market. But look, this new brand will be developed over a number of months, and we'll be doing more research to fine-tune our insights and our plan as we go through. This is how things happen.
But what's that initial research telling you about what they want?
That those audiences at the moment do not connect with RNZ, that they are looking for news which reflects their world and their perspectives and their voices, and that they're really interested in music.
What kind of music? What are they telling you about
All
that?
kinds of music. They are very open in terms of genre. I think the power of Spotify is that people are sort of ranging across a range of genres in their listening, but they want music that is relevant to them. But that will be done by our programming team who we hire and bring in. It's not something that's done by the CEO. I'd be the last person who'd want to do that.
What's your time frame for getting this sorted?
I think that's a question mark, because obviously things have changed, and as I said, I need a couple of days to just reflect on what's happened and
because
decide
remind
on
us,
what happens.
It was May,
Sorry.
wasn't it? It was May, the time frame for taking concert off FM, wasn't it?
Well, that's been removed because we're keeping concert on FM, so people don't need to worry about that. I would have thought in the next 2 or 3 months we will have resolved the issue around the new network, and we'll have resolved next steps in terms of where we're taking the new brand. So it's going to happen. It's going to all happen in the next 6 months still, and within that, obviously, concert's going to continue on FM.
So when you say within the next 6 months, will the new brand be on air within 6 months?
That feels to me like a stretch, because part of this will require us to build a whole new network. But I would have thought even if the network is not fully built, we'll be well advanced with our plans by that stage.
And that's RNZ CEO Paul Thompson. We did ask Broadcasting Minister Chris Farfoy to come on the program this evening, but he declined. It's almost 23 minutes after 5. Let us know your thoughts on that. You can get in touch via text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Minister for Police has slammed white-collar crime as the driving force behind New Zealand's drug trade. Stuart Nash says while gangs seem like the main offenders, it's the well-dressed accountants and lawyers holding the purse strings. His comments follow an international drug bust where up to $5 million worth of drugs were seized by police. Our reporter Isra Email has the story.
Stuart Nash has come out swinging against white-collar crime, labelling it the driver of drug offending by gangs. He says well-dressed lawyers and accountants tend to control the cash side of drug syndicates, making them just as dangerous as patched bikers.
So often what happens is it is the white-collar criminals who are behind the scenes, laundering the money, looking after the money, squirreling it away, and we will never see them. So when we think about, going hard on this, we have to go hard against the gangs and these white-collar criminals.
10 people have been arrested so far. A 31-year-old New Zealand man is facing 94 charges, including drug dealing, money laundering, and participating in an organised crime group. The police have started extradition proceedings against the man, who was arrested at the Italian border earlier this month. Mr. Nash says the 8-month international police operation shows professionals are involved in the drug trade.
While the gangs may be the visible side of drug misery and harm, this actually shows that there are professionals involved also in importing drugs into our country.
The police say organised crime has become more sophisticated over the past 6 years. Detective Inspector Paul Newman says resourcing has been increased to focus on the threat of organised crime.
Organised crime affects all aspects of our community. We're seeing offenders from all levels of our society.
Mr Newman says Operation Mystic has been a huge win. He says police estimate the syndicate has imported over a tonne of methamphetamine, MDMA, cocaine and ephedrine into New Zealand.
That's a huge amount of social harm in our communities, and it's also taking money and resources out of our vulnerable communities as well. That's food for children, quite often education and rent and bill paying. 9
people have so far appeared in the Auckland District Court. The police say they are not ruling out further arrests. For Checkpoint, this is Isra Imhal.
New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is distancing himself from the foundation at the centre of a potential serious fraud office investigation. Following an Electoral Commission investigation into political donations made to the New Zealand First Foundation, the matter was referred to the police and then on to the SFO. But Mr Peters says there's no evidence or proof electoral donation laws were broken. Our political reporter Joe Moyer has the story.
24 hours after the SFO announced it was looking into whether an offence had been committed, Winston Peters fronted media at Parliament.
I don't expect that anybody at the SFO is going to be talking to Winston Peters. Guess why? I was not involved in any way, shape or form.
Already distancing himself from the New Zealand First Foundation, Mr Peters is adamant the SFO doesn't have a case to pursue an investigation.
What the SFO will look at is the evidence and proof where you could make such a conclusion. And they have no such proof and they have no such evidence. And we've got an illegal opinion to back up what we've said. So that's all I can say at this point in time. I see no point in trying to presage what the investigation might do. Our job is to cooperate to the full. I'm very confident of that. And I expect other political parties to do the same as well.
Yesterday, the Electoral Commission concluded money given to the secretive foundation should have been treated as party donations, should have been passed on to the party and declared. But that didn't happen. It's precisely those concerns the SFO is now tasked with clearing up. While Mr Peters says both he and the party have done nothing wrong, the memory of the last time his party had dealings with the SFO in 2008 are still fresh. That investigation saw the party thrown into political exile, and so despite Mr Peters maintaining all is well, he says he had no choice but to review its donations policy.
Because you had all these rumours swirling about and we needed to correct them. Otherwise, the kind of thing that happened past times in 2008, you recall what happened then, don't you? There was a full-scale investigation by the Electoral Commission, the police and the SFO. When it was all over, Winston Peters was utterly exonerated. Those are the facts.
New Zealand First isn't alone in its dealings with the SFO. Last month, the watchdog began pursuing criminal charges over an alleged $100,000 donation to National, but not against the party or its leader, Simon Bridges. The opposition leader wants the New Zealand First matter resolved swiftly, so voters have some idea of the outcome of a possible investigation into the foundation. Mr Bridges says the SFO should be mindful it's an election year.
Voters have a right to know the decisions by the SFO before the election. That's incredibly important.
But the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says Mr Bridges' comments are out of line.
I think it's entirely inappropriate for politicians, especially those who themselves are being investigated by the SFO, to issue any kind of orders to the Serious Fraud Office. They're an independent agency. We need to ensure they remain that way.
After not specifically saying so yesterday, Ms Ardern was asked again if she trusts the Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters.
I do. I work with him every day. I couldn't operate this government without a trusting relationship with Winston Peters.
There's not a lot Mr Peters and Mr Bridges agree on, but a speedy response from the SFO is one of them. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
Coming Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, it is a grim milestone. The coronavirus death toll tops 1,000. A court hears Sir Bob Jones never read a petition which called for his knighthood to be revoked, and the search continues for a tramper missing in Mount Aspiring National Park. A lot of you are already getting in touch about our interview with RNZ CEO Paul Thompson and changes planned for Concert FM. This person says there is a radio for young people. It's called Student Radio. Someone else, though, says, do no younger listeners ever choose RNZ concert program? Why assume it is older listeners? The data included in the RNZ proposal just on that point says 2/3 of the listenership of concert is over the age of 65. And another person says, given that there is a wider review of public broadcasting about to be undertaken, surely youth and diversity will be considered part of that. So why do they need to forge ahead and make these changes now? Why not wait until the outcome of that business case? That is from Megan in Wellington. Thanks for your feedback. You can get in touch. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time now for the headlines with Susanna.
The police are urging people to come forward if they know anything about a boy who was found critically injured at his home in Hawke's Bay. The 4-year-old Flaxmere boy was found on January the 29th with injuries described as horrific. The police say the child will be brain damaged and severely disabled if he survives. Up to $5 million worth of drugs have been prevented from reaching the streets after an international bust. The authorities say 10 people have been arrested as part of the 8-month operation, including a New Zealand man who faces extradition to Italy. New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says he's played no part in any wrongdoing as the Serious Fraud Office investigates donations to the party. Mr Peters says he hopes any SFO investigation will be over quickly. RNZ has welcomed the government's decision to explore opening up a third FM frequency to allow concert to stay where it is. Last week, the broadcaster announced plans to replace the station on FM with a new station targeted towards younger people. RNZ's Chief Executive Paul Thompson told Checkpoint there was miscommunication about the situation, and he's glad the government and RNZ are on the same page. He said the network needs to be relevant to young people, or in a few years' time it will be relevant to no one. The police are planning to use thermal imaging tomorrow as they search for a missing British tramper at Mount Aspiring National Park. 32-year-old Stephanie Simpson was reported missing yesterday morning after she failed to turn up to work. Tourists will not be able to travel into Milford Sound by road for another week and a half. The only access to the area was cut off last week when torrential rain caused slips and washouts. It's hoped tourists will get limited access, possibly in guided convoys, from the end of next week. The government is giving $80,000 to relieve drought conditions in Northland. The money will include technical advice, social welfare and eased tax requirements. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. And if you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint on RNZ National, and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's get to business now with Emma Hatton, who's joining me from our Wellington studio. Emma, you say things are looking pretty healthy for the economy with this latest truckometer, is that the way you say it, data. And first off, what is a truckometer?
What is a truckometer? Great question. So the ANZ truckometer, it's a set of 2 economic indicators which uses traffic volume data basically as a proxy for how well the economy's doing. So put bluntly, the more traffic that's on our roads, the more freight that's being moved, the more likely it is that things are being done. People are going places, doing things, spending money. So that's what that is. And so there's 2 measures. One is called the heavy, which looks at current conditions, and one is the light, which looks forward about 6 months. So both measures actually up for the month of Jan. Heavy, so right now up 4.8%, and light up 2%. So very good news. Based on our traffic data, things are going really well for the economy. However, but there's always a but with these things. While the numbers are looking good now, we need to watch the effects of the coronavirus, of course, may mean next time we look at these numbers, they may be a little flat with things like less stock coming in, logging operations being disrupted, all of that stuff that we would see on our roads. We may see that reflected in this next truckometer data.
OK, there is news today that a New Zealand company has scored a pretty big deal with one of the world's largest mining companies. What are the details there?
Yeah, so Scott Technology, which is an automation and robotics company, has landed a multi-million-dollar contract with Rio Tinto in Australia to design and build an automated mine laboratory. So Rio Tinto, of course, one of the world's largest mining companies, big deal there. What it will do is eliminate a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of dust exposure for people who otherwise would be doing that work, while at the same time keeping a track of data, real-time data as well, so an increase in productivity for what they can actually get out of the mine. So Scott Technology started out as an engineering firm in New Zealand way back in 1913. Now it's got dozens of production bases across the world. It says that companies are looking more to automation and robotics, not only for productivity, but also for workers' safety. So things like automation for dangerous jobs cuts their risk as well as helps keeping people safe. So a really good industry to be in right at the moment. And their share price actually ended the day almost up 5%. So that news out, very pleasing for their investors as well.
And so what else was happening on the markets?
So the NZX Top 50 Index ended the day up 1.1% by 132 points to 11,835, with Air New Zealand and Tourism Holdings among the gainers there. The dollar trading at 63.9 US cents, 95.9 Australian and 49.4 British pence.
Thanks, Emma. That's Emma Hatton joining us with a business update and all the numbers. Investigators fighting online child exploitation say their job is getting tougher by the day. In January, a 40-year-old teacher was stopped at Auckland Airport and found carrying child sexual abuse images and videos on his phone. At the time, Customs told RNZ these fines were becoming more common, and the numbers reflect this. Thousands of referrals of suspected online abuse against children end up with New Zealand authorities every year, and the number of subsequent prosecutions is steadily rising. We wanted to see firsthand how this is being fought. Our reporter Logan Church and videographer Dominic Thomas were granted exclusive access to the team of investigators who combat this every day.
In a featureless boardroom in a typical government office building, a team is meeting. They're a group of professional investigators from Customs, Internal Affairs and the police, and form part of Task Force Ruru, an ever-evolving team first established in 2015. They formed to investigate some of the most serious crimes committed, the sexual exploitation of children, much of which is online.
It's a growing problem. It's a large problem as it is, and it's getting bigger and bigger.
That's Simon Peterson, Chief Customs Officer for their child exploitation team. Just how much of a problem this is hard to quantify. The men and women on the task force are notified of suspected child exploitation through referrals. John Michael of the police has been fighting online child exploitation ever since it was a thing to fight.
We receive a lot of referrals from the United States, from social media companies, and they pass through an organisation called the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. And I think in 2019 they sent out just over 18 million referrals, and 92% of those went outside the USA. And what we see is every year the number of referrals that they send out grows significantly.
Thousands of those referrals first land on the desk of Internal Affairs. There, its investigators get involved, including Margaret, whose identity we have protected. They then search everything associated to the images received.
Everything you're doing for the day is in order, so when you do go to prosecute, you have all your ducks lined up and you've got the best case possible for prosecution. Also, when we look at an investigation, when we're going under them, we come into contact with a lot of imagery, and we'll also start going through the imagery, see if there's anything that would identify a New Zealand child, or just factors we can find to help identify the children.
That is one of the main goals of Task Force Ruru, victim identification, especially if the material is made in New Zealand, as Simon Peterson of Customs explains.
At the end of last year, off the back of an investigation that Customs was doing, we arrested a guy who had been exporting objectionable publications. As we're going through his personal collection of material, we noticed that there was imagery in there that he'd created himself, which obviously meant that there were victims, child victims, from somewhere that he had abused. So we stood up Task Force Ruru for that. The police came and sat with us for as long as it took to get those children identified. There were 6 of them that we found in his collection. And within 7 days, using the resources that Customs has, Police has, and DIA, in the Task Force Ruru model, we had all 6 of those children identified. And most of them, all we had was some child somewhere in New Zealand, and at best we had a first name.
Investigators scrutinise the images they receive for any clues that could identify a child, such as accent or IP addresses, which can help find the location. And Customs investigator Gareth Davis says every contact leaves a trace.
It's all digital, so everything's got a fingerprint associated to it. So New Zealand IP addresses, we can get in touch with the telecoms and we can see who owns the internet at that address, and we just start sort of delving deeper into it and sort of building up a picture of the person we think it is.
But the broadness of the internet has resulted in the broadness of the offending. Back to John Michael of the police.
It might be a one-off conversation on an application on the internet between a child or a young person and someone that they don't know. It could go all the way through to a child or young person being groomed over a period of time, building up a relationship with someone that they believe could be someone their own age, when in fact it's an adult. That could progress to the child sending sexually explicit images or videos, could even progress to a physical meeting. Then you have other cases where we see images from overseas where there is a business around exploiting children. And you see that in the Philippines and other countries where we have the phenomenon of live distant child abuse, where an offender can sit at home in New Zealand, make contact with an organiser overseas, make a payment through many different various means of payments, and then direct the abuse of a child online by webcam.
I asked everyone if their workload was getting bigger. I got a resounding yes. Prosecutions around the exploitation of children are rapidly rising. In 2014, 127 people were prosecuted by the police, internal affairs and customs. That number had increased by 60% in 2018 to 204. Customs also got a funding increase in last year's budget to the tune of $10.2 million to help combat child sexual exploitation across New Zealand's physical and digital border. But the internet is an uncontrollable beast.
You can throw as much as you want at it, you're always going to have work to do, and we just keep ploughing through and doing our best, really.
In Wellington for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And if you're listening to that on the drive home, Logan's piece will go up on our website and Facebook page. And a quick traffic update. If you're on the southern motorway in Auckland, heading towards the city, there's a crash blocking lanes just before Mount Wellington, and it's looking bumper to bumper on the traffic cameras. So do expect delays if you are going that way. Search crews continue to scour Mount Aspiring National Park for a missing British tramper while her family and friends wait for news. Stephanie Simpson left to go tramping over the weekend around Mount Brewster, but the alarm was raised yesterday morning, sparking land and air searches. Tess Brunton has more.
It's been more than 24 hours since Stephanie Simpson was reported missing. Her boss, Douglas Peddle, was expecting her to walk through the door of his Wanaka business, Doug the Gardener, on Monday morning. But when the 32-year-old from Essex didn't turn up, and her friends didn't know where she was, he contacted the police. He says Ms Simpson is keen to explore New Zealand while on a working holiday, and has the experience and equipment.
She was very keen. She's very fit and healthy. Came over from the UK and was keen to explore everything this region has to offer. So, yeah, she'd been doing a few tramps in the area and went away last weekend.
He's been in contact with her family and says they're concerned but are trying to stay positive. A helicopter scoured the area yesterday, but to no avail. Earlier this morning, the search resumed, with a search dog and handler, the Fox Glacier Alpine Cliff Rescue Team, and Wanaka Landsar volunteers involved in finding Ms Simpson. Phoebe Crawford hiked up to Brewster Hut on Saturday, a more than 1,000-metre climb, and says it was a beautiful day with lots of sun and no wind or rain.
The track was a little bit muddy on the way up. There was water on the track. However, you had to cross the river immediately when you walked the Brewster Hut, and that was a really low flow. The river probably came up to my shin. There hadn't been any recent rainfall, and it definitely didn't affect our hike.
While she didn't see Stephanie Simpson, Phoebe Crawford says there were a lot of people about over the weekend.
It's a gruelling climb through the bush line, so it took us an hour and a half to get up through the bush line, and there's a lot of tree roots, so you really have to think about where you put your feet, and occasionally you have to use your hands to pull yourself up. A decent fitness level would be handy, but also I guess you just have to be comfortable on your feet in those sort of conditions.
The search area includes Fantail Falls to Mount Brewster, the Brewster Hut, Mount Armstrong Track and Makarora Valley. Mountain Safety Council Chief Executive Mike Daisley says the main track up to Brewster Hut is more of a test of fitness than navigation, but conditions get trickier once you venture beyond the hut. He says that could make the search for Ms Simpson a challenge.
An individual could have chosen any number of little side trips. If you followed her out to the Brewster Glacier, there's a lot of steep bluffs and it's a very rocky area, so there's a lot of area to search, particularly if people have slipped. It's an environment at this time of the year, there's not a lot of snow and ice around, but there's a lot of loose rocks and difficult to navigate in.
Her friends describe her as bright, bubbly and an experienced tramper. A family friend who didn't want to be named says they're all focusing on the search and police inquiry and didn't want to speak at this stage. The police are appealing for anyone who may have spoken to or seen Ms Simpson to contact them. Sergeant Mark Kirkwood says she was last seen leaving the Brewster Hut towards Mount Armstrong on Saturday.
She was classed as very fit. She works as a gardener and locally. She has done quite a bit of tramping previously. She wasn't carrying a personal locator beacon or an in-reach device. We're trying to find a route that she may have taken and hopefully locate her.
2 people were found dead in the national park over the weekend, but police say they are not believed to be connected to the missing person search. The search is expected to resume tomorrow with thermal imaging. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, TNA.
And it's about 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of you getting in touch about the proposed changes to Concert FM and many of you very excited about the prospect of a youth channel. We'll get to some of that feedback a little later in the program, but do keep it coming. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The jury in the trial of a woman who fatally stabbed her abusive partner has heard a 111 call made the night he died. Karen Riddell is on trial in the High Court in Auckland, accused of murdering Joseph Ngāpera in their Manurewa home in 2018. It's the Crown's case she stabbed him with an intent to kill him, while her defence has argued she was acting in self-defence. Annika Smith filed this story and a warning. Her report contains some audio that some listeners may find distressing.
Potu Cameron was called as a 7th Crown witness this afternoon. He told the jury he was living with his mum, Karen Riddell, and younger brother in November 2018. Joseph Ngāpera, who he called Joe, was living in the house as well. He was sleeping in the early hours of November 14 when his younger brother woke him up.
I had to go into the kitchen and help Joe up.
And when you went into the kitchen of the house, what did you see?
I saw Joe lying on the floor.
Mr Cameron told Crown Prosecutor Jelena Jelavic he tried to rouse Mr Ngāpera, but he didn't respond. He told the jury his mother stood nearby as he checked for a pulse.
She was just standing there telling me to help Joe up off the floor.
When Mr Cameron couldn't find a pulse, he called 111.
There's been an altercation and my mum's partner is on the ground.
Tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know, I was asleep at the time, but I woke up. I heard arguing, and then he was on the ground. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, does anyone there know what happened?
I think my mum does.
You think your mum did what, sorry?
My mum does, but she's a bit intoxicated.
As the call goes on, Riddell raises her voice in the background. The operator then directs Mr Cameron to apply pressure to the bleeding.
Place it right on the wound, press down firmly and don't lift it up to look.
Leave it, Mum, leave it, get out. Yeah, all good.
Okay, is that pressure on there?
Mum, get away!
Mr Cameron continues to yell at his mum to get away as he moves into CPR compressions. Riddell cried in the dock this afternoon as her words, growing in volume, are heard on the call.
Please, baby, please! It's weekend! Please come back, baby! Please come back! Please come back! It's weekend! Please come back! Please come back!
Karen Riddell admits stabbing her partner, but says she was acting in self-defence after years of abuse. The jury has heard she told police Mr Ngāpera lunged at her while she was holding a knife she picked up when her 14-year-old son intervened in an argument. The wider family did not give police permission to interview Riddell's youngest son. Constable Wepiha Te Kanawa, who was called to the house that night, said the young teenager told him what happened. He wrote it down in his notebook, but wasn't permitted to share what was disclosed to the courtroom. Atu I te ko ti matua ko Annika Smith tēnei.
Sir Robert Jones says he's never read a petition which called for his knighthood to be revoked, and he claims defamed him. The petition was started by filmmaker Renee Maihi following comments he made in an NBR column in 2018. The millionaire businessman has now taken legal action and the case is before the High Court. Mediana Johnson was in court today and filed this report.
Sir Robert was all set to take the witness stand this morning when he realised he'd forgotten his hearing aid. After an hour-long adjournment and once another hearing device could be located, his cross-examination could finally get underway again. When being questioned by Ms Maihi's lawyer Davy Salmon, Sir Robert admitted he hadn't read the petition.
Ms Maihi's petition you have not read in toto because she linked to mainstream news that you never read when choosing to sue her.
I've never read her petition, I admit that. All I know was that she was aware, that I was aware that she's running a petition on the knighthood proposition, which is insulting.
You've never read her petition even now?
No.
Sir Robert says he formed the view that Ms Maihi's motives were dishonest and he didn't need to read the petition to establish that. He then went on to say he might have read the petition but he couldn't recall. Sir Robert claims in the NBR column that there are no full-blooded Māori left and that if it had not been for Brits, not a single Māori today would have existed. This comment came under the scrutiny of defence lawyer Mr Salmon.
You would have known before that the notion of measuring Māoriness, as it's described there, according to blood quantum, is deeply controversial?
Oh, it's ridiculous. I've never suggested that. You can't. Blood knows no racial division. Maori blood's the same as our blood. We're talking about ancestry.
It was at that point, and not for the first time, that Justice Thomas had to stop Sir Robert.
Again, unless you want me to do this every 5 minutes, can you please just listen to the questions and answer the questions?
I am, but I mean, he asked me to agree with the blood proposition.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
Oh, then I misunderstood. Sorry.
Start again, please.
An expert witness for the defence is expected to take the stand to discuss the notion of blood quantum later in the trial. Outside the courthouse, 81-year-old Ken Finlay from Ngāti Kahangungu was protesting against Sir Robert.
I know his views on race and Maori. I don't agree with them. That's why I'm down here with this placard. I've got grandchildren who are Maori, and I want them to live in a country that they can feel comfortable in.
Ken Finlay says people on the receiving end of Sir Robert's sense of humour don't find it funny. The author of Once We Were Warriors, Alan Duff, and Emeritus Professor of Political Science and International Relations, Dame Margaret Clark, are expected to take the witness stand for the plaintiff later this week. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Mediana Johnson tēnei.
Leaders across the political spectrum have paid tribute to former Prime Minister Mike Moore on the first sitting day in Parliament. They told the story of his humble beginnings to becoming a major player on the world stage, all the while throwing in a few humorous anecdotes along the way. Our political reporter Charlie Drever was there and filed this report.
In his valedictory speech, Mike Moore said, quote, "It's nice to see so many people here at my farewell and funeral. If only people had said such supportive things when I was alive. I'm sorry, Mike, you're going to have to watch this chamber once again set aside time to commend your many achievements.
And the House did just that, with Parliament moving a motion to halt normal proceedings to pay tribute to Mike Moore, who died earlier this month after years of ill health. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told the House Mr Moore was a true working-class Prime Minister who was kind, caring and humble.
Mike left school at the age of 15 for a job in the freezing works, but he was an avid reader. That he made his way to Parliament just 8 years later is a testament to his work ethic, his dedication and his intellect.
National Party leader Simon Bridges said New Zealand has lost one of its staunchest advocates for free trade, who spent his entire life fighting for what he believed in.
One of the things Mike said in one of his interviews, I think on the 9th floor interview on RNZ, that stuck with me was the greatest betrayal we can make of our people is to not care. No one could say Mike didn't care, and courageously so, about the people that he served.
Simon Bridges said Mr Moore's leadership at the World Trade Organization was short but significant, spreading free trade to the far-flung reaches of the world.
As Jane Clifton noted, Mike Moore was like the opposite of LNP, world famous just not in New Zealand. As I've said, Mike never lacked courage and was a great parliamentarian.
New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has fond memories of Mr Moore's championing of lamb burgers, witty turn of phrase and helping New Zealanders in all walks of life. But he remembers some of Mike Moore's more personal successes too.
Mike was that rare politician whose outlook was improved by his life in Parliament, and he seriously grew in the job. As many of you will know, that as a young man, Mike beat cancer. I can recall him walking into this room after his long sojourn away, and Robert Muldoon, the Prime Minister, went to shake his hand, and the look on Mike's face was one of horror, because he'd wished he hadn't. As I say, Mike grew better with age.
ACT Party leader David Seymour said Mr Moore was a giant on the world stage who is solely responsible for the belief and mantra that New Zealand is a trading nation.
He was responsible for seeing that the Labour Party became supporters of closer economic relations in 1983. Without that sort of consensus in this House, we couldn't have made that relationship with our nearest neighbours a model for the world in trade relationships. This theme of cross-partisanship would actually come to punctuate his career.
That ability to bridge the gap between the political parties was once again evident in the House today.
The question is now that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary opinion, no. The ayes have it.
Mike Moore's public funeral will take place on Friday. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, call Charlie Drever, DNA.
A lot of you are getting in contact regarding the earlier interview with Paul Thompson from RNZ, the CEO of RNZ, about the planned changes to Concert FM and plans for a youth channel. A number of you are pretty excited about the prospect of a channel, especially for a younger audience. This person says, the other awesome important thing that Triple J offers is news and politics for a younger audience. Super important and a massive gap in New Zealand. Can't wait. Someone else says very excited about the vision for the new youth offering presented in that interview. There has been a gap in the market in New Zealand for decades. Good on RNZ. Just hope quality concert offering continues alongside, says Chantal from Wellington. Someone else says, great interview, bring on the new RNZ. Australia Triple J is a great model. I love RNZ. I love commercial-free, government-paid broadcasting. I love RNZ Concert, and I'm super looking forward to the new RNZ brand, that person says. Someone else, though, says, I listened to your interview with RNZ. I think that changing what they are known for is stupid. People love the classical music. Why change the structure of the organisation for a so-called audience who like it just how it is, like everyone else does? And this is from Stephen, who says, I'm uncomfortable with Paul Thompson's suggestion that young people want different news to older people. It's worrying in democracy that we accept that people can pick and choose what type of news they want. We want to hear things we don't like too, if we are to be a pluralistic society. And Rosemary from Katikati's got in touch to say, without the announcers, Concert FM will be no more than elevator music. It would be like a gallery or museum with no labels or information provided. And this short one, but to the point, hey Paul, everyone gets old. And another person's got in touch to say they began listening to national radio as a 20-year-old because it was the only station allowed in the workplace. They go on to say their kids are now 16 and 18 and have grown up listening to national. They actively listen to the news. They enjoy the musical variety and artist interviews that they don't get on commercial radio. A news station relevant to the youth market could easily encompass the best of national and concert, they say.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. A senior police officer says the brutal injuries suffered by a 4-year-old boy, beaten and critically injured at his home, are akin to those inflicted on James Whakaruru, killed 21 years ago. The police are appealing for any information after the boy was found at a Flaxmere property on January the 29th. Detective Inspector Mike Foster says the child will be brain damaged and could be severely disabled if he survives. He says the boy's injuries remind him of James Whakaruru, who died with the only part of his body not covered in bruises being the soles of his feet.
New Zealand's seen some pretty horrific child abuse cases in its time. Having dealt with James Whakaruru here, I think back in 1999 or 98, it's certainly up there with one of the worst.
Detective Inspector Mike Foster. Sir Robert Jones has told the High Court at Wellington he's never read the petition he claims defamed him. He is suing filmmaker Renee Maihi for a petition she started to have Sir Robert's knighthood revoked. That followed an NBR column he wrote in 2018 saying Māori should serve Pākehā breakfast in bed once a year out of gratitude for existing. Under cross-examination by Ms Maihi's lawyer, Davy Salmon, Sir Robert admitted he hadn't read it.
Ms Maihi's petition you have not read in toto because she linked to mainstream news that you never read when choosing to sue her.
I've never read her petition, I admit that. All I know was that I was aware that she's running a petition on the knighthood proposition.
Sir Robert says he formed the view Ms Maihi's motives were dishonest without reading the petition. The head of RNZ has described the government's decision to try to keep concert on an FM as very positive outcome. Following RNZ's announcement to replace concert with a new music station angled towards young people, the government announced they were considering granting RNZ a third FM frequency. Such a move would allow concert to stay where it is, with the new station moving to the new frequency. Paul Thompson says he was encouraged by the government's support.
It is a very positive outcome. How we got there was very bumpy and rocky, but look, we do think that it's really affirming that the government has endorsed our strategy, which is that RNZ needs to become more relevant to younger people and that a new music service is a great way of doing that.
Paul Thompson told Checkpoint the feedback they received was at the upper end of what they were expecting. The police are planning to use thermal imaging tomorrow as they search for a British tramper in Mount Aspiring National Park. Stephanie Simpson was reported missing yesterday morning after she failed to turn up at work. A land and air search today failed to find the 32-year-old, who was last sighted near Brewster Hut. The Mountain Safety Council's Chief Executive Mike Daisley says conditions become more challenging once people hike beyond the hut.
An individual could have chosen any number of little side trips. If you followed it out to the Brewster Glacier, there's a lot of steep bluffs and it's a very rocky area, so there's a lot of area to search, particularly if people have slipped. There's a lot of loose rocks and difficult to navigate in.
Mike Daisley from the Mountain Safety Council. The jury in the trial of a woman who fatally stabbed her abusive partner has heard a 111 call made the night he died. Karen Riddell is on trial in the High Court in Auckland, accused of murdering Joseph Ngāpera in their Manurewa home in 2018. In a 111 call played to the jury this afternoon, Ms Riddell's son, Poto Cameron, can be heard yelling at her while he applies pressure to Mr Ngāpere's stab wounds, as instructed by emergency services.
Place it right on the wound, press down firmly and don't lift it up to look.
Leave it, Mum, leave it, get out. Yeah, all good.
Okay, is that pressure on there?
Mum, get away.
It's the Crown's case Karen Riddell intended to kill her partner while her lawyers say it was self-defence. It will be another week and a half before tourists can be brought into Milford Sound by road. The only access to the area was cut off by last week's wild weather. Road crews are working to reopen it to essential traffic by the middle of next week, with limited access for tourists from the end of next week. Milford Sound Tourism owns and operates the visitors' terminal and wharves in the Sound. Its chair, Roger Wilson, says temporary repairs are now happening on the terminal, which should be back in action by the time most of the tourists return. He says it's a tough time to be in tourism.
Well, it happened right virtually in the middle of Chinese New Year. We're affected both by the coronavirus affecting Chinese numbers, but also now this. Yes, it's certainly the busiest period of the year.
Roger Wilson of Milford Sound Tourism. It's 5 minutes past 6. After the loss of early wickets, India's middle order has fought back against the Black Caps in the third cricket ODI in Mount Maunganui. A short time ago, India were 203 for 4 after 37 overs. Netball Australia has announced the Australian Diamonds head coach Lisa Alexander's contract will not be extended. Alexander has been at the helm of the Diamonds for more than 8 years, leading the team to gold at the 2014 Commonwealth Games and the 2015 Netball World Cup, and silver at the 2018 Commonwealth Games and 2019 Netball World Cup. Alexander's last game in charge will be a charity game for bushfire relief on March the 1st. The son of Brazilian football great Pelé says the three-time World Cup winner is depressed over his poor health and reluctant to leave the house because he cannot walk unaided. Widely considered to be one of the greatest footballers in history, Pelé will be 80 in October and now needs a frame to walk. Many of his recent public appearances have come in a wheelchair. The Wimbledon and US Open doubles champion Colombia's Robert Farah has escaped a ban after an investigation accepted his claim he ingested a banned steroid through contaminated beef cooked by his mother. An intentional doping violation can carry a 4-year ban, but the International Tennis Federation said there was no fault or negligence attached to the outcome for Farah. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a window on the world of panic in Bulgaria, where many parents are taking their children out of school afraid they'll be abducted by an illegal international adoption ring. And Brian Roper, our mainly Marxist thinker, looks ahead to this year's general election with a discussion on political parties, financial donations, that kind of thing. Does class matter in a modern democracy? I reckon you can guess his conclusion on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for all of the North Island, fine weather, apart from areas of cloud tomorrow morning. Fiordland, Southland and Otago, fine, but cloudy periods about the south coast, becoming cloudy everywhere tomorrow night. Rain developing at night in Fiordland with scattered falls for Southland and Clutha. For the remainder of the South Island, fine today, cloudy areas developing in Canterbury and Marlborough tonight, fine tomorrow, apart from areas of morning cloud. Chatham Islands mostly cloudy with a few showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine. RNZ National, it's 7.5 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The police are appealing for information after a boy was beaten and critically injured at a Ramsey Crescent address in Flaxmere at the end of January. The 4-year-old boy is in a serious condition in Starship Hospital and is likely to be severely disabled if he survives. Lead investigator, Detective Inspector Mike Foster, is on the line and joins me now. Detective, this case sounds horrendous. Can you start by giving us a bit of an overview of this boy's injuries?
Well, look, 2 weeks ago now, this boy was taken by ambulance to the Hawke's Bay Hospital with severe injuries. I can't go into detail as to exactly what those injuries are, but he's received extensive injuries across the whole of his body. He has a severe brain injury, which, if he does survive, will make him, half his brain or part of his brain is dead at this stage. So he's going to be severely brain damaged for the rest of his life.
Was a weapon used in this assault?
Well, at this stage, we're not sure. It's unclear. We're speaking to a number of people. We're speaking to people who are obviously at the address. We're speaking with the extended family as well. So how those injuries became, we're not entirely sure at this stage.
Is it your belief it was a single incident or a number of attacks?
Well, we believe it's been a sustained beating. It's clear from the medical opinions that the injury that he sustained to the head would have rendered him unconscious straight away. Now, the other injuries, I couldn't tell you, and the medical staff can't tell us whether that's been sustained over the day or the sort of 2 or 3 days prior.
So, Detective, is it your belief that the boy, once he was rendered unconscious, that the beating has continued? No, I'm not saying that, but once he was rendered unconscious, then he was unable to function again. So whether he's been beaten after that, I couldn't tell you. Is there evidence of any pre-existing injuries?
Not at this stage. We're still dealing with the medical fraternity up at Starship, so hopefully we might have that information over the next few weeks.
You say that you're talking to a number of people in relation to the injuries. How helpful are they being?
Look, some of them not all of that helpful, to be honest, but we're trying to work with the family. We've been working with the family for the last 2 weeks, so we're going to continue to try work with them. Some of them are scattered throughout the country, and we've had people in Auckland speak with some. So it's going to be an ongoing relationship with them, and hopefully somebody will stand up and tell us exactly what has occurred to this poor child.
So were there other people in the house when this happened?
There must have been people in the house when this has happened, because we know that these injuries are not self-inflicted.
I mean, besides the perpetrator, is it your belief that other people were present while this happened?
There were other people in this house throughout that day. We do know that at the time of the actual incident, we were unsure.
So, are they protecting someone?
Well, again, we're still working with the family, and we'll be speaking to them on and off for time to come yet.
But is it your belief that they are not telling you everything that they know?
We believe there is more to be told, yes. That's all I'll say on the matter.
So they are protecting the person who potentially inflicted these horrendous injuries on a small boy?
Well, potentially it could be, but again, we're still working with this family to find out exactly what has happened to this poor child.
Was he in his own family home when this occurred?
Yes, he was.
So is this an address, a family or a boy that is known to you or any other agencies?
We are aware of this family, but and again, that's all I can say on this issue. The child was in his own family home at the time.
So how can people help you?
Look, we're asking for anybody who may have any information on how this child sustained these injuries to come forward and speak with us. We need some people to stand up and let us know what's happened. This poor child will probably never function as a proper human being ever again. So if the perpetrator can't take responsibility and tell us, then we need somebody in that family to tell us exactly what has happened.
Seems pretty cowardly, doesn't it? Not to front up, not to say what you know.
Yeah, look, I'm thinking that the person or persons who have done this will be going through a range of emotions at the moment, and so all we can ask is that whoever is responsible, whoever does know what has happened, please come forward and speak with us for the sake of the child.
How long have you been a police officer for?
30 years now.
Have you seen anything like this before?
Look, I've seen, over 30 years, you see a range of nasty things. And I've dealt with, a number of pretty nasty child abuse cases. But this certainly would be right up there in terms of injuries that I've seen on a child.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is the lead investigator, Detective Inspector Mike Foster, who was working on a case involving this 4-year-old boy in Ramsey Crescent in Flaxmere who has sustained horrendous injuries. They need the public's help. They're asking you, if you know anything, to ring Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. That number again, 0800 555 111. Or you could also call the Hawke's Bay Police on 06 873 0524, 06 873 0524 if you can help at all. RNZ's CEO has confirmed Concert will stay on an FM frequency, but says a proposed new youth radio network is also likely to go ahead. RNZ's board met last night after the Prime Minister revealed she would fight to keep Concert on air, and a public backlash from a chorus of famous listeners, including Dame Kitty Te Kanawa, former Prime Minister Helen Clark and former Attorney General Chris Finlayson. The RNZ board today said it welcomed the government's decision to free up another FM frequency and explore the creation of a multimedia music brand to target a younger audience. CEO Paul Thompson admitted this afternoon RNZ had not asked the government for another FM frequency. He told me whilst Concert would stay, plans for the new youth network would also forge ahead.
I would have thought in the next 2 or 3 months we will have resolved the issue around the new network, and we'll have resolved next steps in terms of where we're taking the new brand. So it's going to happen. It's going to all happen in the next 6 months still, and within that, obviously, Concert's going to continue on FM.
So when you say within this next 6 months, will the new brand be on air within 6 months?
That feels to me like a stretch, because part of this will require us to build a whole new network. But I would have thought, even if the network is not fully built, we'll be well advanced with our plans by that stage.
Do you think there would have been what appears to be a reversal in fortunes here if it wasn't for the fact that people like Helen Clark, Dame Kitty Te Kanawa, Chris Finlayson and some other QCs didn't get vocal about this situation?
I have no idea, and you'd have to ask the government about that, the ministers about that. What I think is that the idea of a new service for young New Zealanders is a compelling one. These frequencies that have been tagged to our project, they've languished on the shelf for more than 20 years. They were set aside for a youth radio network. They've never been used for that. So I think what's more driven this is the opportunity around doing something really positive in public broadcasting. At a time when the New Zealand media is under a lot of strain, this is a very good news story about providing something new and trusted.
Given that you were looking to set up a youth radio network, did you ask for another frequency?
No, we didn't.
Why not?
And the reason for that is those frequencies have always sat there, and there's been various attempts to deploy them, and there was absolutely no signal that that was on the agenda until we started to unfold this plan.
Isn't that an oversight on your part? Wouldn't that be an elementary thing to request another frequency?
Look, you can make that comment. In my view, this is all just part of quite a difficult process.
Did you go off half-baked with this?
No. Look, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and say, why did that happen like that? But this was always going to be an incredibly difficult project. However you tried to explain it. We'll take our knocks, we'll take, the bumps that we've had. But if you look at where we've arrived at, we're in a much better position now to develop a range of services for a wider range of New Zealanders. And yes, the debate around Concert has been fraught for us, I admit that. It's been really intense, but such is the passion with which people believe in that brand, that was always going to be really difficult. And our dilemma is, do we do nothing? Do we get stuck? Do we try to do something and move it forward? And we've done that, and I think the overall result has been positive.
And that's RNZ CEO Paul Thompson, and Broadcasting Minister Chris Farfoy declined Checkpoint's request for an interview today. It's almost 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Rubbish from an old landfill in Gore has been exposed by the floodwaters. The banks of the Waikaka stream, which runs past a popular park and playground in Gore, have been washed away following torrential rain in the region last week. The dump operated for about 30 years and was only closed 15 years ago. Joining me now is Gore District Mayor Tracy Hicks. Good evening, Tracy. What is it looking like down there?
Evening, Lisa. Thanks for the opportunity to have a chat. So it's a beautiful day, I have to say, but looking at an exposed landfill is not always the most pleasant sight. But I guess when you have the volume of water that we've had come through and in such a short time, then it's going to shift a whole lot of earthen material, and it has done that. So at this stage,
what's floating in the river, and where is this stuff?
There's nothing floating in the river. It's just you can see that a landfill has been there, and there is some bits and pieces that are obvious. But I'm not aware of anything in the river or washing up in other parts of the region from this landfill. It's a reasonably confined face that's been exposed, but we just want to make sure that we do the right thing and get that fixed as soon as possible. So we've got some experts in town today assessing that, and they'll give us some advice hopefully within 2 days so we can get on and get it fixed.
So what are we talking about? Is it debris on the banks, or how widespread, and what contents?
Yeah, no, it's a landfill face that's been exposed, so it's compressed, and there's bits of plastic and just bits of household waste that you can see. I haven't been up close. I'm watching it. I'm looking at it from probably 50, 60 metres away, and you can see it very, very clearly.
So what are your immediate concerns then?
Well, I guess we don't want to have it exposed so that a subsequent event might risk it even more. So hence the rush to get it sealed, and then let's work out how to remediate it properly for the future. But I guess what we're looking at here is something that all of New Zealand is looking at. There are literally hundreds, probably thousands, of these old rubbish tips that always backed onto a river or onto the sea, and it just seemed to be the way it was back in the 50s and 60s, and unfortunately it's not like that anymore, but we're having to deal with some of the legacy.
Is there any suggestion that there's anything toxic in there?
No, and I don't know.
So are you going to be checking that?
Oh, look, I'm sure there will be, but certainly the immediate reaction is let's get this sealed, and then we can work out where to from there.
So how long have you known that this could potentially be an issue?
No, I haven't known that this is potentially an issue. I do know that we've got landfills, as I say, right across the nation, but there's several in Gore District that are built near watercourses, so of course they're always going to be a risk.
Any idea at this point, Tracy, how much it's going to cost to fix this up?
No, not a clue. Sorry, not a clue. We just want to get it assessed and then fix it, and we'll deal with the cost afterwards.
Given that it's exposed and you don't want it to go any further, what's the weather looking like down your way in the next few days?
Brilliant. Pretty good actually. Pretty good. It's a brilliant day today, and the next 2 or 3 days are also looking pretty promising.
So when will work start on this?
I don't know because I don't know what we're going to have to do. So waiting on that advice, and as soon as we get that, we'll work out a way forward.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Tracy Hicks, the Gore District Mayor there, talking about it's an old landfill and it's been exposed by the recent torrential rain. They're looking at, what they can do about it to hold it back. The death toll from the coronavirus has reached a grim milestone today, surpassing 1,000, and its impact is spreading too. For the first time, China's leader Xi Jinping has appeared in public in a mask, urging more decisive measures to contain the illness. Outside Hubei province, the rest of China is making slow progress towards getting back to normal. The extended national holiday is over, but few people are returning to work. The ABC's Bill Birtles reports.
In the middle of Beijing CBD, on his first day back at work after an extended national holiday, real estate agent Ren Yaoli is putting a positive spin on the coronavirus outbreak.
I'm not too worried about the outbreak because I think our country has built a good virus control system. It's not as horrific as people think, and I don't think people should exaggerate it. While our business is affected, in general, I think with crisis comes opportunity.
Others nearby aren't so chipper. Qiao Dong, a small shopkeeper, regrets his decision to open up straight after the national holiday. There are no customers today, he tells AM. The rent here is expensive and there's no way I can afford to hire anyone, he says. Most shops are closed, as are cinemas, gyms and bars, making the capital a very quiet place. Liu Yinping runs a couple of cocktail bars, and despite anecdotal reports of increased swiping by bored singles on dating apps, he says no one would dare go on a date at the moment.
There's no point in opening the bars. We won't have any business. Everyone's staying at home. So now we're hoping to see if we can get a little bit of compensation from the local government or a bit of rent relief.
It's much the same picture across China. In the southern provinces, where manufacturing is king, many factories are still shut due to a lack of workers and strict new regulations about outbreak containment. Construction sites also sit idle. The great labour migration that has underpinned China's economic rise is stalled due to transport restrictions and people heeding government advice to stay home. On the ground, it's hard to believe China's economy is growing at all, and that normal demand for Australian imports like coal and iron ore can be sustained while the crisis continues. Beijing is supposed to host the country's annual political showpiece in just over 3 weeks, where thousands of delegates travel from across China to gather together. It's where the new official economic growth target will be revealed. It's unthinkable such an event could go ahead in the current crisis, but registrations are still taking place for the March 5 opening. Delaying it would be a major embarrassment for China's government. There are some signs that the infection rate outside the epicentre Hubei is slowing, but not much, and certainly not enough to contain this crisis before early March.
And that was Bill Birtles reporting. Two of the leading candidates in the Democrats' fight to take on Donald Trump have requested a partial recount in Iowa. Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg were neck and neck once the delayed results came through, and they want votes from some precincts they believe were calculated wrong checked. At the same time, the focus turns to New Hampshire, where the primary will be held tomorrow. And with a lot on the line and the opportunity for a candidate to emerge, the definitive frontrunner, the rhetoric has been ramping up. CNN's Ryan Nobles reports.
The sprint is on in New Hampshire.
We're going to have to bring our party together in order to beat Donald Trump.
The Democratic candidates in a mad dash across the state, making their final pitch to voters and opening new lines of attacks on their rivals.
And he's a good guy. He's a great mayor. But guess what? He was a mayor.
Former Vice President Joe Biden downplaying the experience of former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Come on, man. You think this guy's not a Barack Obama?
Buttigieg quickly firing back on CNN's State of the Union.
Well, he's right. I'm not, and neither is he.
But it's not just Biden.
The message of this campaign is us, not me.
Senator Bernie Sanders is attempting to hold off a Buttigieg surge by knocking the wealthy donors funding the former mayor's campaign.
You are my donors. We don't go to rich people's homes and get advice from millionaires and billionaires.
For his part, Buttigieg knocking Sanders for being too divisive.
This is a moment for bringing as many people as we can into the picture. But a picture where your only choices are between a revolution or the status quo is a picture where most of us don't see ourselves.
The Sanders-Buttigieg matchup here coming on the heels of their razor-thin contest in Iowa, where the final outcome remains unresolved. The Iowa Democratic Party released results Sunday that show Buttigieg earning 14 national delegates to Sanders' 12. Today, both the Sanders and Buttigieg campaigns each filed a formal request with the state party for a partial recanvass of precincts they believe were calculated incorrectly.
We have a newcomer in the White House, and look where it got us. I think having some experience is a good thing.
And while the leading contenders battle it out, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar hoping to capitalize on her strong debate performance, raking in more than $3 million since Friday night.
If you are someone that has to make that decision about filling your refrigerator with food or filling a prescription, I know you, and I will fight for you.
So there's no doubt that Bernie Sanders feels very strong about his chances here in New Hampshire. But we should also point out, in many ways, that it's a must-win for him. This is a state that he won by a big margin back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. He is from the neighboring state of Vermont, so it is all on the line for him here. If Sanders is able to pull it off, this could be the start of a momentum that could propel him to the nomination, especially because he shows strength in many of the upcoming states, including Nevada. And then when you get into Super Tuesday, California, which is the biggest prize of all. But it has to start here for him. And the Sanders campaign is hoping tomorrow night is their first big victory of the Democratic primary season.
Ryan Noble's reporting, and so much feedback on the Concert FM issue. Do not adjust your dials. Let's get through some of it. RNZ has got their research all wrong. There are plenty of radio stations for young people. Radio NZ has a point of difference for all ages. Don't do it, that person says. Youth abandoned Facebook because the oldies moved in. There's no way they'll embrace a middle-class, middle-age construct. Catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police are appealing for any information after a 4-year-old boy was found beaten and critically injured at a Flaxmere property last month. A jury has heard a harrowing 111 call in the trial of a woman who fatally stabbed her abusive partner in their Manurewa home. It will be the end of next week before tourists can enter Milford Sound by road after torrential weather cut off access. And the search for a 32-year-old British tramper who went missing in Mount Aspiring National Park will resume tomorrow, aided by thermal imaging. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7, ahead of Nights with Brian Crump.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Anyone will tell you that. He was a darling little boy, a really, really, really lovely, likeable, charming child. People used to ring up and say, come over and bring Taika.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
So you're diving down.